I'm Rena Striegel. Welcome to Ag Inspo, the podcast that focuses on innovation and creativity in agriculture. In my travels across the U.S., my mind is blown by the farmers, ranchers, and business owners who are contributing to the richness of the agricultural landscape. My hope is that by sharing their stories, you will be inspired to have the courage to break through and bring an idea you have to life. Hey, everybody, we're so excited to have you join us for this episode of Ag Inspo. Today, we are going to be talking to Tara Vander Dussen, better known as the New Mexico Milkmaid to all of her social media followers. So Tara has got an interesting story of growing up in the dairy industry and being an advocate for dairy. And now she has taken a huge leap of faith and has stepped into being a full-time online influencer. So without further ado, let's bring her on and let's learn a little bit more about what she is doing and what she's got coming up next. Tara, it's so great to have you on the podcast today. I have been looking forward to this conversation ever since we set it up a couple of weeks ago. But, before we get into all the things we're going to talk about today, why don't you just take a couple of minutes and introduce yourself to the listeners?
Yeah, so thanks for having me on. I'm so excited to get started talking with you. My name is Tara Vander Dussen, and you probably know me, if you know me, online as the New Mexico Milkmaid. And so I share online through several different platforms as the New Mexico Milkmaid. I wear a few different hats, but my main role on the dairy is I work as an environmental scientist. That's what I went to school for. And I just assist producers in New Mexico throughout the Southwest with, their federal and state regulations, their permitting, water rights, all of that good environmental stuff is really where I focus most of my time and energy. And then just sharing about that online. I feel like there is a piece missing online about sharing, the sustainability side of dairy farming. And so that's kind of where I got started.
Yeah, that's really awesome because I think the online space is still a little bit of a catch-22, isn't it? It's like you want to educate everybody, but then the second that you go out into the social space, you're wide open for all kinds of positive or negative feedback from the greater community of the internet, right? So tell me why you decided to go from, just being, very gainfully employed, doing the work that you're doing. Why did you decide to take that into the online space? Because you have got a tremendous following as well. So it's not like you're just doing it and you've got, 5 friends that are going, hey, good job. You've created a community of people who are following the New Mexico Milkmaid to see what you're doing next. So what prompted that decision to go into the online space?
So I have been working in the environmental field for about 10 years. And honestly, I love it. That has been where my heart is at. I just think that when I started, working as an environmental scientist, I really wanted to be a voice for producers, to their legislators, to their regulators, the people at the state and federal levels that were issuing permits. I kind of wanted to be that liaison between producers and those people and make sure the communication was open and that we were having constructive dialogues. Growing up, a lot of the time, my dad, especially in college and even high school, my dad was working on what is now considered the new dairy rule in New Mexico. And so I saw a lot of those communication gaps between the regulators and the producers. And so I really wanted to fill that gap with the dairy farmers and support the dairy farmers and be their representative. And so I think early on, even if I didn't realize it, if you asked me, I'm an environmental scientist, that's what I went to school for. But really it was about communication and opening up those dialogues. And so then about 5 years ago, my daughter actually hits her birthday tomorrow. She's turning 7. Wow. So it was about the time that she was, I was kind of on the mom blogs online. I was on the mom Facebook groups. And I was just seeing so much misinformation about dairy farming. And a lot of it was focused on sustainability. And, you could easily find blogs. There's a ton of great dairy farm bloggers out there who were sharing about animal care at the time. And you could link to that. But when it came to questions about, the carbon footprint of milk, sustainability, water use, just greenhouse gas emissions, there just wasn't a lot of producer perspective out there. And so that was really what prompted me to kind of start sharing my side of the story as I kind of saw it. I don't share about cows. I don't work with cows. So to be honest, I was really nervous getting into this space because I was like, I don't know if people are going to want to come to my page and see that I'm a dairy farmer, but that I don't really share about cows. Like it felt kind of like I wasn't sure where I would fit in. And I had no idea at the time where it would grow to. And I don't think I realized how much sustainability, that buzzword, was going to become part of our lives, part of agriculture, part of food decisions. And so, I just kind of was sharing what I knew. And it has been such an incredible journey. It does open you up when you share online, like you mentioned, to the good, the bad, the ugly. But, every time that somebody shares something with you, leaves a comment, you learn a little something, you do a little better the next time. And honestly, overall, I always tell people the experience I've had sharing online has been tremendously positive. Like so much more positive things have come than negative things. And so you kind of, you take the negativity when it comes, but overall, that we need to be sharing, we need farmers' voices out there. And so it has been such an incredible journey for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. How has your focus on sustainability and educating about sustainability, how has that changed, your operation? Because you're part of a large dairy operation and you're from a dairy background.
Yeah.
So how has that changed directly, some of the things that are happening in your own operation?
Yeah, so I didn't mention in the beginning, I guess I should have, sorry for my terrible introduction to myself, but I grew up on a dairy farm in New Mexico my whole life. I married the next door neighbor, a dairy farm. My dad always jokes that I went out of state for college to come back and marry the neighbor, could have saved a lot of steps along the way. But yeah, so now I dairy farm with my husband and his family in New Mexico. And so, I always tell people that one of the things for me that I think about is my grandfather never would have thought about what the consumer thought about animal practice or about sustainability, as far as water use, land use. And so it's amazing, I think, in just a very short amount of time, we have gone from that to the fact that a lot of our decisions that we make on our farm are based on what we think consumers want, what we think consumers need, and what they expect from us. And there's been positive things that have come out of that. I think a lot of times we think of the negative things that, oh, we don't want to be controlled by people or people not on the farm telling us what to do. But at the same time, I think that it makes us strive to be better, to do better. I think the transparency that has come with technology, social media, has given us the chance to really open up our farms and show people why we're doing what we're doing, how we're doing what we're doing. And it's really changed things. Just in the last 10, 20 years, I think we're changing the narrative and just by opening ourselves up a little bit.
Yeah. What have you found, as you've maybe seen some things happening online, what have been some of the biggest wins in terms of what you feel or how you feel you've been able to kind of change that narrative and maybe take I guess they're called the trolls, right? The people who are just out there wanting to, argue and fight. Have you been able to see a shift where some of those people are like, oh, okay, that makes sense? Or is it once a troll, always a troll?
So I think that there is definitely the movable middle, which is the majority of consumers that maybe have seen something online negative about some type of agriculture, whether it be dairy or something else, and has questions and just is not sure. They've kind of been like, wait, what was that? What's happening here, with agriculture? Then there is the small, but sometimes the loudest percentage of people who are actively, they're animal activists. They, you're never going to change their mind is the way that I see it. And so, no, I don't think I have a ton of success stories about changing their mind, but I have, for me, it's the small wins. I had a mom just the other day just send me a DM out of the blue and was like, I've been following your page for a long time. And I was only giving my kids plant-based milk because I thought that dairy was bad for the environment. Nothing against plant-based milk on my end. I always say, I want you to know you can feel good about whatever choice you make. And these are the reasons why. And so she said she has now started buying local dairy, milk from a local dairy farm that processes milk, and they love it. And it's like a part of their lives now. And for me, those wins are everything. It wasn't that she was an animal activist and I changed her mind. It was that she was a mom that just wasn't sure about what she was feeding her kids. And by sharing some facts and information, I was able to change her mind. And now they enjoy a variety of milks, and you don't have to feel guilty about it. You don't feel bad about it. She can feel really confident in that decision. And so for me, it's those little wins that are really the big deal.
Yeah. When you have a community as large as yours, what are some of the things that you've been able to do to sort of bridge the gap between, maybe that consumer base? And I'm assuming that a lot of your followers are actually other people in production agriculture that are learning along with you and, are creating a community. What have you been able to do in terms of bridging the gap between people who provide services to producers and the producers? Because I am sure that at this point, people listen to you because you've got the ear of so many.
So when I first started sharing, I was so worried about being in that ag echo chamber, and that I was only reaching ag people. And I realized not to focus on that as much as I used to, because reaching one person is reaching one person no matter what they are. And I also realized that a lot of ag doesn't know about different types of ag. I don't know anything about pork production, and I follow some pork producers now, and I learned so much. I didn't know anything about veal production. I followed a veal farmer and learned about it. And there's just a ripple effect though. So I had a conversation with someone not that long ago about veal, and I was like, hey, I was misinformed too. Here's what I've learned. And it changed that person's mind who wasn't in agriculture. And so just by educating, no matter who you're educating, if they feel more confident about dairy farming and the messages that we have and the facts that we have to back us up, that's going to create more of a conversation. And just that, you use the word community, which I love, because, they share one of your posts or you share one of their posts. It's just that many more people that you're reaching. And then you reach outside. I had a lady who was a personal trainer who I think she has over 500,000 followers, who somehow found me from someplace. And she shared with her followers about how if you had questions about milk, you should reach out to me. And I was like, it is working. We are so folks, being able to share to ag is important, and it ultimately does lead to a bigger, community and, just a larger audience of people that are outside of your bubble. And so it all works together in the end, but it was hard at first to not feel like I'm not reaching anyone, but you are reaching people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's, such a valid observation that, even in agriculture, we really know what we know, but we might not know anything to the left or the right in terms of what our neighbors are doing. And I think that's such an interesting comment, because I find that myself as I go around and work with all kinds of different producers, is that when I share, oh, did you know that the pork producers are doing this? They are. And then they'll be like, well, we should look into that. And all of a sudden you're kind of cross-pollinating the knowledge from one group to another. And yeah, like you say, you never know what that ripple is going to cause, but it's always exciting when you can see an aha moment coming from an area that you didn't expect. So yes, that has to be really fun for you.
Yeah. And I feel like the last year, especially with COVID and the situation we had, there was so many places where people were scared about their food and the food supply and food running out. And so by being connected in agriculture, I could say, well, here's what's actually happening in that type of agriculture. And so then even though it went out maybe to other dairy farmers who saw that, that was okay, because people needed to still see that information. And so it's just amazing. I mean, it's the power of social media, right? And just the impact that it can have so quickly on how many people you can reach.
Yeah. Some people, I feel, and I am one of those people, find it really challenging to figure out what to post or how often to post. So you have now been posting very consistently for a very long time. So where does the inspiration for your content come? Because I know it's not just all hardcore educating. This is about milk, right? You sprinkle in your family and I love that post that you did the other day about, this is what happened when I told my mom and dad I was doing.
Yes.
I thought that, I think I watched that too much.
My Despicable Me comment that was like the one where the guy is like, Mom, I did something so cool. You're going to be so proud. And it was when I told my parents that I made a massive career change from a stable, well-paying job to sharing as an online advocate.
Yeah, I watched that one probably too many times.
My mom left a comment, was like, I promise I'm so proud of you. I was like, thanks, Mom. No, so, it's funny sharing. It can be really challenging to share every single day. I think I've been sharing pretty much every single day for, I don't even know, maybe like 4 years now. And so your inspiration comes from different places. And I think the most important part is including like your everyday life. The weirdest things will make connections with people. Like you being you is what makes connections with people. And that's what they stay around for. That's what they're there for, is learning about your life. And then you can share about dairy farming just through everyday things. And so, yeah, you might come to my page and be like, you don't share about dairy farming that much, but that's because I want to build connections outside of dairy farming with people. And I want to connect with them on like a different level than just about dairy farming. And so, and for, inspiration, it comes from a lot of different places, whether it just be life events. I've come to find out that how I'm feeling in the moment and sharing that is the best like advice I can give anyone. If I try to plan out content, that doesn't work for me. I know it works for some people. For me, I have to be in the moment, how I'm feeling, what is happening, whether there's a news article out or just what's going on in our lives. And then this year has been a little challenging to have inspiration because we haven't been going to conferences and we haven't, a big part of my platform is sharing about different conferences I attend, different speakers I talk to, different research being published. And so it's taken a little bit more, I feel like, effort on my end to still go and seek that information out versus just being able to share, the topics that are being discussed at different events. Mm-hmm. But there's always something to share in agriculture. Like it's just new and exciting every day.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a really brave thing is that, in agriculture, we always talk about diversification, following passion, just being in alignment with what your purpose is, right? I mean, that is now becoming something that I hear so frequently. It's not, people are really rebelling against the obligation of doing what has been done before, right? Mm-hmm. And so, here you are, you came from a dairy farm, you married into a dairy farm, you had this job, and you just decided, I'm going to leave the job to become an online influencer, which a lot of people, let's face it, that's kind of the new Hollywood, right? Everybody would like to be an influencer and, have a group of people that's following what they're doing and they can just live their life and make money that way, right? So now, as soon as I said make money, you started laughing. So that's maybe something we need to dig into. But so when you went through that decision-making process to leave the job in order to be able to, devote more time to New Mexico Milkmaid, there obviously was some things that were going on with New Mexico Milkmaid that allowed you to still pursue your passion for education and advocacy, but in the online space. So what was going on that you felt like you had more freedom over here than what you did in the job you were actually, paid to do?
Yeah, I mean, I loved my job last Friday was my last day. So this just happened. And I honestly loved my job. Like I turned in my letter of resignation with like tears in my eyes. I did both jobs for way too long, but I just hit a point where they just weren't aligning as much as they used to. And my passion was just ending up someplace else. What I originally started out to was to be, a voice between producers and their like legislators and regulators, like I mentioned, now is turning into that I wanted to be the person sharing between dairy farmers and consumers, dairy farmers, and on a more national level, like our congressional delegation and just be able to speak to a bigger audience. Mm-hmm. And I was really just struggling between time management of those two things. And they just were getting further and further apart. At the beginning, they were more aligned where I could do both and it was working towards like a common goal, but they're just becoming further apart. If I wanted to be able to take off and go to a conference, I had to pay time off for my job to go do that. It was getting harder to balance and juggle. And, it was also hard being on a job schedule for being an influencer. Like there was times I just needed to be able to do things for New Mexico Milkmaid and I couldn't because I needed to meet deadlines for a job. And so, it was, the money, I laugh about the money thing because I do think that people think that online influencing is just like, oh, you just throw something up every day. And there is just a lot more to content creation and working with brands and collaborations than what people, I think, see on Instagram. And for me, there's a lot more to it than just even the online side of things. I do a lot of speaking engagements. I am still doing private consulting for, environmental with dairy farms, keeping my foot in the door there. It just, with both jobs, I was being pulled in too many different directions. With New Mexico Milkmaid, I felt like while I got to do a bunch of different things, I got to do it all under a single umbrella, if that kind of makes sense.
It does.
So I could pursue all of my passions. I'm a multifaceted person, but it just gave me more freedom to do that.
Yeah. So give me some of your top tips, because, this is where the coach in me comes out. Give me some of your top tips for, as our listeners are sitting there going, man, I just wish I could do something like that. Like I'm over here doing, my role in the farm or inside my business, but I really want to pursue something different.
Yeah.
Give your top tips for how you make a move from, doing what you're doing now to carving out some space to be able to migrate into maybe an area that has a lot of interest or where you're really passionate about it. Like from your experience, what are the top 3 things somebody should be doing?
So, one of my pieces of advice is if you're able to do both for a little while, do both. I did not give up my well-paying job till I knew New Mexico Milkmaid could fully support me and then more, And so if you can do both, do it while you're kind of figuring it out. But at the same time, my second piece of advice is going to be go all in. Like there were so many times in New Mexico Milkmaid's history where I really held back. I started my blog first. Then I waited 2 years before I actually started sharing on Instagram every day. Now, why? Why did I do that? 2 years could have just been so much growth and opportunity and just a place for my blog to be shared. And then I waited another year before I started a Facebook page. Then, it just was I think find what you're really passionate about and just go for it. Don't be afraid. Don't hold yourself back. And so that, I know those are kind of 2 opposing things, but I'm just don't quit your job until you can do, that you have something. But then when you have something, go for it. And then my last piece of advice is don't feel like you have to be one thing. You can have more interest. I think if I had sat down and thought about what I wanted to do 5 years ago, I wouldn't have seen how all the pieces fit together. And now they all make sense. Or if I had to try to explain it to, my loved ones, how all these things, speaking, sharing about brands online, environmental consulting, my own private environmental consulting, social media training, how this was all going to fit, it wouldn't have made sense to anyone else. But to me, it did. And that's okay. You can do more than one thing and you can be more than one person. And if in your mind, it makes sense how it all comes together, it will be something amazing. So that's probably my top 3. I hope that helps. I don't know if that was.
No, I think that's really good, because I think that is, we get into this state where everything's got to be perfect before we can do something. I've got to have the perfect amount of time, the perfect schedule, the perfect this, and it doesn't have to be, right? It can be a little bit messy and it can be a little bit unorganized, because it'll all come into focus as you find your pace.
Well, and we talked about this, I know, off air, but I redid my website last year, and I had a website that someone helped me create, and it just wasn't me. And that's another one of my biggest piece of advice is authenticity, which I know is a buzzword right now too. But it wasn't me. It just didn't feel like me. And so I went for it and just figured out how to make a website. I put every word on that screen is from me. Every picture was picked by me. And it wasn't perfect when I launched it. I had people be like, you barely started this 3 weeks ago. I don't think you should be ready to launch. And I was like, nope, today sounds like a good day. Let's go for it. And it worked. Like, it's like, I love it. It's worked. Have I tweaked it? Yes. Have I changed things? But I'm still tweaking and changing it to this day. So if it wasn't perfect a year ago, that's okay. It's still not perfect now. It's not going to be perfect a year from now. I didn't have a shop when I started. Now I have a shop. Like, you're going to be changing and adding things. And so just go for it sometimes, and don't hold yourself back.
Yeah, talk a little bit about authenticity, because I think that this is one thing that a lot of people have a voice, they have a unique story, or they have a unique perspective, and they feel a little nervous about taking that out there because they're not sure how it'll be received. And then of course we've got the, ever popular imposter syndrome, where I think all of us who are in the public space worry about that a little bit. Like, am I good enough to be here? Is what I'm saying relevant to anybody? So did you find that you had experienced that, or was that something that you did not experience at all?
I experience that every day. And especially as someone who just quit my job to do this, I really feel imposter syndrome. And I know I get in my own head, and it comes through when I'm sharing then too, that that I'm hesitant, and so that's where that authenticity really comes into play, is be you. Everyone has a unique story to tell. Like, I always hear like, oh, the online, ag space is so saturated. You're like, that's physically impossible when we're only 1% of the population. Like, get out there and share. Everyone's story is so unique. You will find people that you connect with that I could never connect with. And don't try to be anyone else. Like I said at the very beginning, I didn't feel like I fit anywhere. I totally felt imposter syndrome because my role was not traditional dairy farming. Like, I actually didn't classify myself as a dairy farmer at all. And so who was I to be sharing about dairy farming when I don't touch a cow all day? Like, I literally handle water and manure. And so I felt that big time. But what I realized is that my unique voice was important, and how I shared was important. I share a lot of professional photos that are very, like, I spend hours preparing, how my clothes are going to look and how my jewelry is going to look. And that doesn't feel authentic to me. And that's not for everyone. Like, that's absolutely not the path everyone should take. But for me, that felt really like comfortable and where I wanted to be, and the audience that I wanted to be connecting with, and the community I wanted to build. I wanted to be able to share about my favorite turquoise that I picked up, or my favorite dress I got at Target. So I made sure that was who my brand kind of was all encompassing of those things. Like, and, it's funny, there's now like a movement online that's like the fancy lady cowgirl. I don't know if anyone's seen that, but it kind of goes to that, like, you can be down, you can be out on the dairy farm, like working with soil and manure and water, and then like to get dressed up. And that was who I wanted to be. So again, I like, this is probably gonna be like a common theme. I don't know that it would have like made sense to anyone else, but it made sense to me, and it made sense to the people I wanted to connect with online. And so get over that imposter syndrome. Be you. You can't be an imposter if you're being you and you're being true to yourself. And so that's, kind of, I guess, where I came to, but I still struggle with it. So don't act like I'm saying I've got this all figured out.
Yeah, I would be shocked if I ever met somebody that was like, well, I should take that back. I think there probably are a few people in the world that just like, I'm going to just put it out there and I don't really care. There might be a few of those, but I think almost all the rest of us do have a little bit of nail biting that happens when we hit the publish button, and then we're like, what's going to happen next?
Yes, absolutely.
So now you've made this huge decision. You are a free woman. You now are a business owner, entrepreneur, social influencer, 100% of your time. In addition to being a mom, we should mention that you have got some adorable little ones.
Thank you.
But where do you want to go next? Like, now you've got 100%, well, I shouldn't say 100% of your time, 100% of your work life can now go into, your passion project. So where do you want to go from here?
So I haven't even talked about this yet, but I'll go ahead and share. I feel like compelled to share. So I have been working on a book for about 9 months, and it hasn't gotten very far because I don't have the time to dedicate to it. But I just recently have come to the realization it was meant to be a podcast in addition to a book. And so I am hoping that, along with my husband, Daniel, that we will be releasing a podcast in the next couple of months. So we are working really hard on that. So that's probably my passion project right now. I still want it to be a book. I still feel super strongly about it being a book, but I have come to the realization that one of my favorite things to do is talk, which if you know me, you're like probably laughing because it's not a surprise to anyone. And so I just feel like being able to share through a podcast platform is just like where I want to be. That's where I want to be my next step. I also I think my other passion project, I have a couple. I have a lot of things in my head that sometimes are all over the place, but I want to help teach producers to kind of do what I do, how to tell their sustainability story. I think talking about environmental stuff makes people nervous sometimes when actually it's really easy and farmers are doing such amazing things. It doesn't have to be even anything exciting. Like the regular farm is doing incredible things. And so I would love to be able to better help producers have the resources they need to go out there. So that is something I'm working on the side. And then I guess continue speaking now that I have a little bit more time and I don't have to worry about paid time off and those kind of things. I can have more free time to go and do presentations and be a part of panels. So that's kind of the three directions I feel like I'm heading in right now.
That's awesome. One of the things that I was really impressed about when I talked to your husband a couple of weeks ago is how supportive and proud he is of you.
Yes.
That is definitely one very big fan that you got there.
So he is pretty amazing too.
So, as you guys were talking about all of this, because that's sometimes a barrier to entry for people to pursue something they're passionate about is the fear that their spouse or their partner won't be supportive of it. So tell me a little bit about that journey as you and Daniel kind of explored. Do we go this way or do we go this way? Or do we kind of try to keep doing both? How did that go for you guys? What were some ahas that came out of that?
Yeah. So Daniel and I's marriage, I feel like all marriages are unique, but we are very aligned with our business goals, I guess. We just have a lot of overlap in what we've done. While I was an environmental consultant, he was one of my clients. The dairy was one of my clients because I actually worked for a third party. And so we overlapped a ton. And then with New Mexico Milkmaid, there's just a lot that he is brought in on and that I need support on or ideas. I work from a home office. So sometimes I just need somebody to listen and hear these ideas or see the content I'm creating and give me some feedback. And so we work really well together. I feel like we are one of those marriages that Monday through Friday, we are business partners. We are just determined to help each other's businesses succeed and be there, just be a part of it. He recently, I guess, it's probably been 6 months now, set goals for himself for the next 5 years. And one of his goals, which is one of the most meaningful things to me, was to support Tara and her goals. And that is so important. And it is important when you're going to do a lot of different things and be a mom and have a family business. Mm-hmm. His job takes up an incredible amount of time, as we all know, with farming. And so a lot of my job has to be supporting him, as well, supporting our family and, in day-to-day tasks, as well as, bringing in an income. And so I'm so thankful to have someone that supports me and understands that business aspect of it, and so I think the transition was really easy for him. When I came, I had been a long time coming. I did both jobs for way too long, like I said, because I did love my job. But he was like, it's time, you need to do this. And so it was so great to not have somebody holding me back or questioning. I'm one of those people that's way in my head already. And so I need a spouse that is absolutely no, go for it. You can do this, go get it. And that is exactly what he is for me. In all of my crazy ideas. We're about to take on an entire home renovation project that we'll be sharing on our blog. And I am definitely the one pulling up the Pinterest things. It's can we do this? And he's like, yes, but we're not going to. So he's really great about being my grounding, giving me the freedom, to go do things and help encouraging me to do that. But then sometimes he's like, okay, we need to rethink this just for a minute. But with leaving my job, yeah, he was definitely the one that was it's about time. You need to do this. You need to just go full in and yeah, he's my biggest supporter for sure.
Yeah, just talk a little bit about that, because I'm always really fascinated by people and their business planning process. And I think what you've just described is you've got you've got a marriage where both of you have very large careers and you're very career and achievement minded, and yet you've been able to work together really well. So talk a little bit about your business planning process and how you two marry that with two such diverse businesses.
Yeah, I think having it be like a common theme helps. Like, I think it would be, for me, it would be harder, I think, if I was in a different field that didn't somehow relate to his field. Like, it is really nice that in the end, it's all like our focus is on dairy. I think it keeps us well grounded with each other a little bit. It keeps our conversations like just more similar. Like the topics were just like, even today he was working on something and I was like, I saw an article about that. I'll email it to you. Like, for me, I love that overlap. I think for some people it would be hard to maybe have that much overlap. If you heard our conversations, they are like dairy business focused a lot of the time. We're both Enneagram type 3s, if you follow Enneagram. So in marriages that are both 3s, you end up very business focused in your marriages, but we love it. Like, we recently had a whole day. My mom took the girls and we were out doing like stuff for our business. We were looking at farmland and we got done that day. And I was just like, this was the best day. Like, I loved our day. Like, that's not what it was. It wasn't intended to be a day date. It was a work day actually, but it was like so fulfilling for both of us. And so I think that's a big part of it too, is we both find fulfillment from helping each other like succeed, that we can do that team building, that it's both of us like working towards a common goal. And so as different as what we're doing is, I think we see the commonalities like between them. And then ultimately, sharing online and connecting with consumers is going to better his business as a dairy farmer, and having a larger market. And so it goes together then. And I love that. I love that overlap.
What have been, we talked a little bit ago about some of the successes that you've seen. What have been some of the biggest disappointments of pursuing the world of influencing?
So I would say for me, one of the things that's been really hard is the putting yourself out there for everyone to judge you. Like, I take things super personally. And I've had to just recently come to a place where I'm just like, if you don't like what I'm sharing online, I kind of don't care anymore. Like, I mean, I do, but I don't at the same time. I don't care as like I used to. I've gotten to a really great place where I'm not going to make everyone happy. I'm not going to be able to please everyone, but I'm going to try my hardest to make sure I'm representing ag and dairy in a way that I feel like I would want to have someone else represent our industry. And that's the best I can do. Like, my best is the best I can do. And so I think I just had to let a lot of it go. It is weird. You share so much of your life with whoever wants to follow. And it can be weird in your personal relationships, because people know, like, you'll see someone and they'll be like, oh, I saw you were doing that the other day. And you're like, oh yeah, like, I forget that you like watch, like, that people see what I do online. And so that's been probably just a hard thing, is how it has affected in like real life relationships, and navigating that. Like, it's not that it's that bad. It makes things different, I guess, if that makes sense. Like,
yeah, sometimes I have found that, in a large family operation, there's people inside the operation that are not comfortable with everything that gets published online, and they start to feel like that's really scary and you're putting us out there too much. Have you found that with your family, that there's a little bit of trepidation about how many people see what you put out online?
Absolutely. I think, we are a really big family. My husband is from a family of 6 boys, and 5 of the 6 are involved directly on the dairy farm, as well as my father-in-law. And there's just a lot of us. And so obviously everyone has different comfort levels with everything each other's doing. I have one brother-in-law that serves on a lot of boards, so that he's out there too. I mean, he's published in different publications, journals, different quotes he's given. And so, there's different comfort levels. That's one of my reasons for sharing as the New Mexico Milkmaid and not under a farm name. It's because I wanted it to be about, my life and not necessarily the larger family farm. And there's generational things. My father-in-law doesn't even have a Facebook. So when I have to go in, like the first time I had an animal activist attack and they were like, we're going to find your farm. And I was like, I feel like I need to tell your dad this. It was really hard to even communicate like with him what was happening exactly. Like he's a super smart man, like just absolutely amazing businessman. It was just, I was using words that like, shares and posts and, and so having to explain even. So some of it, ends up being quite comical, like trying to describe what I'm doing. But I think overall, like my father-in-law sees the value in what I'm doing, and that this is a part of the future of dairy farming is being able to connect with consumers and share with them about agriculture. And if we can't do that, we're not going to have a market for our product. So I think overall the support has been extremely supportive and positive, but there's just different challenging times that you experience, and people take things differently. You put something online, you meant it a certain way, and someone else takes it a different way, and so it can make for interesting conversations, great dinner time conversations with the family about what you shared online that week.
So, just as we wrap up today, and this has been like super fun, and I'm going to be so excited to see where you go next and watch the launch of the podcast. And I'm going to ask, do you have the podcast named, and do you know when you're launching so we can give like the sneak preview to everybody?
Yeah, so I think we are hoping to launch June 1st. That's Dairy Month, but we'll see it. That May is quickly approaching, as I'm realizing. And the podcast name is The Hands That Feed Us. It's a little bit of a play on like, don't bite the hand that feeds you, or, that saying. And I really, really want to share with people about where their food comes from, which I feel like in ag, we talk about that a lot, but I really want to look at like how food is grown and have farmers share their stories about things. Like when I think about a different, like a pineapple, like I have no idea what a pineapple bush tree, what it looks like, like I wish I knew that. Like, where does a pineapple come from? Where is it? What state produces the most pineapple, or whatever? I want to know the fun facts about that crop and about the farmers growing that crops. And so that is the goal of the podcast, is to kind of be able to share that from a farmer's perspective, not from the checkoff or marketing campaigns or anyone, but from the farmer themselves, what it's like to grow their crop, what their favorite thing is about that crop, and just what they want consumers to know about the food that they're providing.
That's awesome. That's going to be super exciting, because that's the one thing that I have found, is that every single farm that I've ever stepped foot on, I learned something that I was like, really, I didn't know that. And I started, just writing down all these like funny facts that I learned, and especially from kids, because kids are they're just so transparent, and they will pick the weirdest fact to tell you, like they're showing you their chickens, and, they'll say, did you know that chickens snore? And that's still my favorite fact that I've ever learned to date, is that chickens snore. So, if she goes, yeah, you can hear them all the way from the house. And I was like, that's awesome. So I think that that's going to be great. And I can't wait to see who you get for guests and
that is exactly what I want. Like, I just feel like there's so many random cool things, like, and maybe that's just like the nerd geek in me that's like, I love those random facts. And that's what I want like farmers to share. And I think that those are the things that stick in consumers' minds, and that they think about when they buy something at the grocery store, is that one time they heard something about this farm, and that's what I want to share and have fun with it. And so I hope we get some fun guests and some different people. I want to get some real specialty crops that we just don't think about a lot. And then I would love for it to turn into a coffee table book that you would have out on your coffee table for people to see, and have little bits about the food that ends up on our tables.
Oh, I think that would be fabulous. That's a great idea. So for all you listeners, it's already taken. You can't go duplicate it. It's Tara's, leave it alone.
I love it. Thank you.
No, that'll be super great. We will look forward to that. So in the meantime, while we're waiting for the podcast, tell people how they can get in touch with you, follow you. Where's the best place for that?
Yeah, so I'm pretty much everywhere online as the New Mexico Milkmaid. So on Instagram, New Mexico Milkmaid, Facebook the same, and then my website is newmexicomilkmaid.com. I'm on Twitter as NM Milkmaid, but I'm rarely on there. And I just joined Clubhouse as NM Milkmaid, and we'll be doing some audios on there very soon. That's another little thing coming up, but I hope to host some panel discussions, rooms, whatever they call them on Clubhouse. So that is where you can find me.
Awesome. So for everybody listening, we are going to put that in the show notes. So don't freak out. We will get it all there. That way you can just click and get right to where you're going. So Tara, thank you so much for taking time out of your day. I'm so excited about what you're doing, and thank you for what you're doing. I think there's not enough people, sort of communicating the positive side of agriculture. So thank you for your work, and we'll look forward to seeing that amazing podcast online soon.
Yes, thanks for having me on. Thanks for following along with my page and asking me to be a guest. I really appreciate it. This was a ton of fun.
Awesome. Thank you. This is Rena Striegel, and you have been listening to Ag Inspo, the podcast. Please visit my website at tomorrowiscoming.com and find me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. If you haven't yet, please go to iTunes and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Join me next week for another inspirational episode where you will hear from another amazing entrepreneur who has had the courage to break through and bring an idea to life.